Rain lashed against the glass walls of Lenox Hill Hospital. It was past midnight, and the city outside looked like a smear of silver tears. Inside delivery room 6, Grace Whitmore, 8 months pregnant and fighting contractions, clutched the rails of her bed. Her breathing was shallow, desperate. The fetal monitor beeped in uneven rhythm. "Doctor, I can't breathe," she gasped, voice cracking. The nurse at her side adjusted the mask, frowning. The oxygen level on the monitor flickered, then dropped. 96, 89, 75. Outside, through the narrow window in the door, a tall woman in a burgundy trench coat stood half-hidden near the equipment storage. Her manicured fingers, wrapped around a Cartier bracelet, twisted a small metal valve. Click. The soft hiss of air stopped. Inside, Grace arched her back in agony. The room alarm blared. The nurse panicked, shouting for help. The fetal heartbeat line flattened for a split second before flickering again. "Oxygen failure. Get the resident." The woman in the trench coat, Sloan Hart, PR director of Lancaster Dynamics, turned sharply, walking down the corridor as if nothing had happened. Her heels clicked like a metronome counting down someone's life. Downstairs in the private waiting area, Cole Lancaster, Grace's husband and CEO of one of New York's most powerful corporations, stared coldly at his iPhone 15 Pro. His voice was calm, detached when he spoke into it. "Make sure no one connects this to me. I want it quiet. You understand?" He hung up, looked at the rain hitting the window, and whispered to himself, "This chapter ends tonight." Back upstairs, chaos unfolded. The senior nurse, Elena Torres, burst into the room and spotted the disconnected tube near the oxygen port. She grabbed it, reattached it, and oxygen began to flow again with a hiss. Grace coughed violently, gasping for air. The baby's heartbeat fluttered weakly on the screen. "Stay with us, Grace. Stay!" Elena pressed the call button for emergency support. The obstetrician rushed in, barking orders. Within moments, the room was filled with blinding white light, hands, voices, panic. But amid the noise, Elena's eyes locked on the maintenance log tablet left on the counter. Still open, still recording. Someone had swiped an access card just minutes earlier. VHale admin, Dr. Victor Hale, the chief obstetrician. Her gut twisted. Grace's consciousness faded in and out. She heard fragments. "She's crashing, oxygen restored, fetal heart slow." Then darkness. When she woke hours later, everything was white, curtains, ceiling, machines. Her newborn lay in an incubator beside her, small but breathing. The doctor said, "You're lucky. 3 more minutes without oxygen and we'd have lost both of you." Lucky, the word echoed cruelly. Through the fog of pain and sedatives, Grace noticed the faint outline of her husband in the hallway, speaking softly with Sloan. He wasn't looking at her. He was smiling. Her hand trembled as she reached for the oxygen mask, feeling the cold plastic against her skin. Something inside her broke and hardened. She didn't know it yet, but this accident would ignite a war of blood and legacy that would shake Manhattan's elite to its core. 2 weeks earlier, the world still thought Grace Whitmore was the picture of success. The media called her the modern fairy tale. The humble daughter of a distant billionaire, married to one of Manhattan's most admired CEOs. Yet behind the marble smile, her world had already begun to crack. That night, the Plaza Hotel glittered with chandeliers and laughter. It was the annual Lancaster Dynamics Charity Gala, an event Grace had once helped organize, but this year she only attended as the wife. Her swollen belly pressed against the soft silk of a navy Dior gown, and her diamond wedding band caught the light every time she raised her glass to hide her trembling hand. Across the ballroom, Cole Lancaster was magnetic, laughing, shaking hands, posing for photos under the golden crest of the Lancaster logo. Beside him stood Sloan Hart, dressed in silver satin, her hand resting too comfortably on his arm. When reporters asked about the company's new rebranding, Cole smiled and said, "Sloan's been my right hand for everything." Grace felt her throat tighten. Someone nearby whispered, "She looks more like the wife than the assistant." The laughter that followed cut through her like glass. She retreated to the restroom, locking herself inside a marble stall. The sound of champagne glasses and jazz faded behind the heavy door. Her phone buzzed, a notification from a gossip blog. Cole Lancaster spotted hand in hand with mystery woman on Fifth Avenue. The photo showed Cole and Sloan, laughing under the awning of the Peninsula Hotel. Grace stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. She had seen that smile before. the same one he used to charm investors, to win rooms full of people. For years, she had convinced herself he loved her quietly, that his coldness was just stress. But now, under the bright cruelty of Manhattan lights, the truth was unavoidable. Still, she smiled when she returned to the table. She always smiled. She had grown up in a house where emotions were expensive and appearances were everything. Her father, Richard Whitmore, taught her never to flinch. When they got home that night, the penthouse overlooking Central Park was silent, except for the hum of the city below. Cole removed his tuxedo jacket, tossed it carelessly on the couch, and poured himself a drink. Grace approached him slowly. "Who is she?" she asked quietly. He didn't look up. "Don't start, Grace. You're emotional. You're 8 months pregnant. Focus on the baby." The dismissiveness stung more than the betrayal. She turned away, swallowing her anger. But when she opened her MacBook Pro later that night, she noticed an email in his deleted items folder. Its subject line read, "Image Strategy, Single Power Executive." The attached proposal outlined a PR campaign, rebranding Cole Lancaster as a visionary, bachelor CEO entering the next phase of leadership. Her heart froze. In the reflection of the screen, she saw herself, hair messy, face pale, hands shaking. Her whole marriage suddenly looked like a press release waiting to expire. She closed the laptop slowly, pressing a hand against her stomach. The baby kicked. Tears slipped down her cheeks, soundless. From the living room, Cole's voice echoed, "I have an early flight to San Francisco tomorrow. Don't wait up." He left the next morning before dawn. Grace stood by the window, watching his Mercedes S-Class disappear into the fog of Park Avenue. The city glowed beneath her feet, but she had never felt smaller. That afternoon, she went to her prenatal appointment alone. Dr. Maya Singh smiled warmly, explaining the baby's growth, the importance of rest. Grace nodded, pretending to listen. She was somewhere far away, inside her own silence. When she got home, a single red rose lay on the kitchen counter with a note, "Let's talk soon, S." Her breath caught. The handwriting was unmistakable, Sloane's. Grace sank into the chair, clutching the note. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the glass, beautiful and cruel. She didn't know it yet, but that rose wasn't an apology, it was a warning. The countdown to her destruction had already begun. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air like grief. 3 days had passed since the oxygen malfunction nearly claimed Grace and her newborn son. She woke to the rhythmic beep of machines, the soft hum of the NICU next door, and the emptiness beside her hospital bed. Cole hadn't visited once since that night. Not even a text. Only silence. Elena Torres, the night nurse who had saved her, stood quietly by the window. "Your vitals are stable now," she said, trying to smile. "The baby's breathing stronger each hour. He's a fighter like you." Grace wanted to thank her, but her throat ached with unshed tears. "Was it really an accident?" she whispered. Elena hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the patient log tablet she was holding. "The report says yes, but the timing doesn't feel right. I checked the maintenance log. Someone accessed the oxygen controls just before the alarm." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't trust anyone yet." Before Grace could reply, the door opened, and the world seemed to still. Richard Whitmore stood there, tall and composed, his silver hair catching the sterile light. In his charcoal coat and tailored suit, he looked like power personified. For years, Grace had only seen him in magazines or business journals, always surrounded by board members, rarely by family. Now, for the first time in a decade, he looked at her not as an executive, but as a father. "Dad?" Grace's voice cracked. He approached the bed, his usually unreadable face trembling at the sight of the tubes, the bruises, the pale skin of his only daughter. "You almost died," he said quietly, his voice shaking for the first time in her memory. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" Grace turned away. "You stopped answering when I married him." Silence. Then a sigh heavy with regret. "Because I thought you were safe." He pulled a leather chair closer and sat down beside her. "I was wrong." Behind him, Daniel Brooks, Richard's longtime head of security, stood like a silent shadow. The moment Richard entered the hospital, he had already set things in motion. Background checks, quiet calls, legal observers. When Richard Whitmore moved, the city trembled. He placed a hand over Grace's. "You don't have to speak of it now, but I will find out what happened here." She met his gaze, strong, familiar, terrifyingly determined. "He did this, didn't he?" Richard didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. Later that evening, in the hospital's private lounge, Richard gathered his team. Daniel, a private attorney, and a cybersecurity specialist named Ava Chen. The lights were dim, the Manhattan skyline glowing through the wide glass. "I want every log from that night," he said. "Oxygen systems, staff entries, security footage, all of it. If there's a shred of manipulation, we expose it." Daniel nodded. "Already pulling badge data. There's a record under Dr. Victor Hale's credentials, used twice within a 2-minute window." "Then start with Hale," Richard said. His tone was ice. "Find who paid him." Downstairs, Cole finally appeared. He wore a dark overcoat and that same cold smirk. "Richard," he greeted, voice dripping with false civility. "Didn't expect you to fly back so soon." Richard stood. "When someone tries to kill my daughter, I don't wait for an invitation." Cole's smile faltered. "Careful with your words. It was an equipment failure." Richard stepped closer, his voice calm but lethal. "So you say, but remember, money built you, and money can bury you." They stood face to face, two men of power separated by morality. One built his empire with honor, the other with deceit. As Cole turned to leave, he muttered, "You're too late. She's already mine." Richard watched him go, then whispered to Daniel, "Not for long." That night, as Manhattan's skyline shimmered below, Richard Whitmore declared a silent war, a father's revenge cloaked in strategy, wealth, and ruthless precision. Monday morning dawned cold and glassy over Manhattan. From the 48th floor of Lancaster Tower, the skyline glowed like a field of knives. Cameras flashed. Journalists crowded the lobby. The company had called a press update to address the incident that nearly killed Grace Whitmore, the CEO's wife. Cole Lancaster, immaculate in a charcoal suit and Rolex gleaming at his wrist, stood before the microphones. His tone was smooth, rehearsed. "It was an unfortunate malfunction," he said. "Our thoughts are with my wife and son. Thankfully, both are stable. We're cooperating fully with hospital authorities." Beside him, Sloane Hart scanned her notes with a perfect PR smile. To the cameras, she was poised. To those who knew her, she was pure calculation and silk. "Let's control the narrative," she had told Cole an hour earlier. No guilt, just sympathy. Behind closed doors, she'd already scheduled trending hashtags, Miracle Mother and Strong CEO Family. Within minutes, sympathetic posts flooded social media. The world saw a grieving but dignified husband, a man holding his family together. But not everyone believed the show. Across town, in a discreet apartment near Columbus Circle, Ava Chen sat with her MacBook Pro open, lines of data scrolling like rain. "This isn't just a glitch," she murmured. "Look at the access times." She enlarged the hospital log. Oxygen control tampered with at 2:13 a.m., exactly when Grace coded. And the ID used? V. Hale admin. Daniel Brooks leaned over her shoulder. "Dr. Victor Hale," he muttered. "Chief obstetrician? But why would he risk his license?" "Because someone paid him," Ava replied, "and whoever did it is smart enough to cover the trail, temporarily." She typed another command, pulling metadata from hospital cameras. One clip caught a faint reflection on a glass panel, someone walking past the storage cabinet moments before the alarm, the outline of a woman in a burgundy coat. "Pause there," Daniel said, his voice tightening. "Zoom in." The image sharpened, Sloane Hart, face half lit by emergency light, her Cartier bracelet catching a glint. Ava exhaled. Well, the PR queen was in the wrong room at the wrong time. Meanwhile, at Park Avenue, Richard Whitmore's penthouse buzzed with quiet fury. He stood by the window, speaking to Eleanor Park, an independent board member of Lancaster Dynamics known for her integrity. "Eleanor, I don't want a scandal," he said coldly. "I want truth. If this was negligence, fine. But if it was deliberate, that company's leadership will answer." Eleanor's voice was steady. "If you bring me proof, Richard, I'll call for an internal inquiry, even if it costs me my seat." Down at Lancaster Tower, Cole sipped espresso in his office, Manhattan glittering behind him. Sloane entered, heels clicking on the marble floor. "Press went perfect," she said, sitting on the edge of his desk. "You looked heroic. Trending #1 in under an hour." Cole smirked. "Good. Keep pushing the accident angle." She leaned closer. "You're not worried about her father?" Cole's eyes darkened. "Whitmore's a relic. Money can't touch me when perception's on my side." Sloane nodded slowly, though a flicker of unease crossed her face. She'd seen Richard Whitmore's kind before. The men who didn't threaten, they executed. That night, Ava sent Richard the reflection photo. "We've got her," the message read. He forwarded it to Eleanor with a single line. "The rot starts at the top." Across the river, in her hospital bed, Grace scrolled through her phone. Every post showed her smiling with Cole, headlines reading, "Power couple survives medical scare." She felt sick. None of it was real. She looked down at her sleeping baby, whispering, "They think I'm weak. Let's show them what weakness can do when it wakes up." And somewhere in a dark office, a public image began to crack. One pixel, one secret, one lie at a time. The snow outside the hospital melted into gray slush, streaking down the window like the last traces of innocence. Inside room 214, Grace Whitmore sat upright, pale but alert, cradling her newborn son in trembling arms. His breathing was soft, steady, a sound that anchored her to life. The nurse adjusted the blankets. "He's stronger every hour," she said gently. "A true Whitmore." Grace smiled faintly, but her heart ached. The baby's name tag read Noah Whitmore Lancaster. She couldn't look at that second surname without tasting bitterness. The man it belonged to hadn't appeared since the press conference. Her husband, the man she'd nearly died for, had vanished into camera flashes and headlines. Elena Torres slipped quietly into the room, glancing over her shoulder before closing the door. "How are you feeling today?" "Tired," Grace murmured, "but alive." Elena hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Grace, I shouldn't be saying this, but I checked the maintenance log again. The system didn't just fail, it was accessed twice. The second entry was 3 minutes before your oxygen dropped. Same ID, VHAL admin." Grace's grip on the baby tightened. "So it wasn't an accident." Elena looked around nervously. "Keep this between us. I'll testify if I have to, but be careful. They're watching everything." Before Grace could ask more, a quiet knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Richard Whitmore, carrying 2 cups of coffee from Starbucks, one black, one latte with extra foam, just like she used to order when she visited his office as a child. "Good morning," he said softly. "You look stronger." Elena took the cue to leave. The room filled with the familiar, heavy silence that always hung between father and daughter, love buried under years of distance. Richard sat by the bed. "I saw the reports. The company's PR machine is impressive. They've turned your pain into their redemption story." Grace laughed bitterly. "He's good at turning lies into strategy." He studied her face. "You think he did this?" Her eyes glistened. "I know he did, and he's not even afraid. That's what terrifies me." Richard leaned back, staring at the baby. "When your mother died, I buried myself in work. I told myself that was strength, but it was cowardice. I left you to learn pain alone. Never again." Grace blinked, tears slipping free. "Why now, Dad?" "Because now," he said, reaching into his coat pocket, "someone tried to kill my bloodline." He placed a small USB drive on the tray beside her meal. "Ava found something. Security footage. It's blurry, but there's a reflection of a woman in red leaving the equipment room. We're enhancing it. You don't need to worry about evidence. You just need to heal." Grace stared at the drive, heart pounding. "And if you find proof?" Richard's eyes hardened. "Then I burn them down, every single one of them." The words sent a chill through her. Her father had never raised his voice, never needed to. His calm was the kind that frightened powerful men. Later that night, Grace tried to sleep but couldn't. She watched the city lights flicker across the hospital ceiling. She remembered her wedding at the Ritz-Carlton, where Cole promised to protect her forever. She could still feel the weight of that lie on her finger, the ring she'd stopped wearing. She reached for her son's tiny hand, whispering, "You will never grow up in a world where power means cruelty." Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Stop digging or the next oxygen mask won't malfunction." Her heart froze. She turned the phone face down, clutching Noah to her chest. Outside her window, a black Mercedes idled in the snow. Inside it, a shadowy figure spoke into an earpiece. "She's awake. Tell him she's not backing down." The snowstorm had passed, but the chill inside Lenox Hill Hospital lingered. Nurses whispered in corridors, doctors avoided eye contact, and every shadow seemed to carry a secret. For Elena Torres, the woman who had saved Grace's life, fear was no longer abstract, it was personal. That evening, she stood in the supply closet, her heart pounding as she copied files from the hospital's internal server onto a small USB drive. Each click of her mouse felt like a countdown to disaster. When the progress bar finally reached 100%, she exhaled shakily and slipped the drive into her uniform pocket. The hallway outside was quiet. Too quiet. Elena peeked out and saw Dr. Victor Hale walking toward the elevators, his white coat perfectly pressed, his face unreadable. He had always been polite, too polite. But now, after what she'd seen in the access logs, his presence made her skin crawl. She stepped back into the shadows until he passed. The moment the elevator doors closed, she darted toward the stairwell, her sneakers squeaking faintly on the linoleum floor. In her car parked across the street, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number Daniel Brooks had given her. "It's Elena," she whispered. "I have the maintenance logs and the access card data. It proves someone opened the oxygen system manually. Twice." Daniel's voice came through, calm but urgent. "Don't email it. Meet me in person. There are eyes everywhere." "I can't leave the hospital till midnight," she said. "They've changed my schedule, again." "Then hold on. I'll come to you," he promised. Elena ended the call and leaned back against the seat. Her hands were shaking. Through the windshield, she saw the hospital's bright windows reflected on the wet asphalt. For the first time in years, she wished she had never taken the night shift. Inside the hospital, Grace tried to rest. Richard had gone home briefly to handle business, promising to return before dawn. She stared at the small bassinet beside her bed. Noah slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing outside. The lights dimmed for the night. Just as she began to drift off, her phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Elena. "Something's not right. Hale's watching me." Grace sat up immediately, her pulse spiking. She typed back, "Where are you?" No response. Meanwhile, Daniel was already on his way. His Mercedes S-Class cut through the quiet Manhattan streets, wipers slicing the drizzle. He parked in a side alley near the staff entrance and waited. Elena appeared 5 minutes later, breathless, clutching her coat around her. She climbed in, glancing over her shoulder. "He knows," she whispered. "I think he saw me copy the files." Daniel started the car. "Then you did the right thing. Give me the drive." She handed it over, her fingers trembling. "There's more. Emails, timestamps. Someone from corporate authorized those system overrides." "Corporate?" Daniel frowned. "Who?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. "Stop before you disappear like your last patient." Elena went pale. "Oh my God." Daniel hit the gas. "We'll keep you safe. Whitmore won't let this slide." At 1 a.m., they reached the underground garage beneath Whitmore Holdings. Ava Chen was waiting, laptop open, coffee steaming beside her. She took the USB, began decrypting files. 5 minutes later, she looked up, face ashen. "Daniel, this wasn't just Hale. Someone inside Lancaster Dynamics approved a medical intervention labeled Client Private Directive, and the signature." She turned the screen toward them. It was Cole Lancaster's digital authorization. Elena covered her mouth. He ordered it. Grace's oxygen hadn't failed. It had been executed. As Ava backed up the data, the lights flickered. Daniel instinctively reached for his gun. "Backup generators?" he asked. Ava shook her head. "No, someone just cut the power." Outside in the darkness of the garage, a pair of footsteps echoed closer. Steady, deliberate. The hunter had found the ones who knew too much. The next morning, New York woke up to a carefully orchestrated storm. Every gossip site, every morning talk show, every glossy online magazine carried the same headline: Grace Whitmore suffers postpartum breakdown. Husband CEO heroically stands by her. The photos were perfect. A shot of Grace crying in her hospital bed, taken without her consent, circulated like wildfire. Another showed Cole holding a press conference, eyes heavy with concern. And the final one, Sloane's hand on his arm, as if offering moral support. The machine was working exactly as Cole and Sloane had planned. In the Lancaster Dynamics PR office on the 32nd floor, Sloane leaned back in her leather chair, sipping cold brew from a Starbucks cup. The glow of the monitors reflected off her flawless skin as she scrolled through the trending hashtags. Strong CEO family, mental health awareness, support Grace Whitmore. Brilliant, she murmured, smirking. We spin her as unstable. We become heroes. Cole stood by the window, watching the Manhattan skyline through the tinted glass. The pity narrative works every time, he said. People love a wounded wife and a loyal husband. Give it a week, they'll forget the hospital. Sloane turned her chair toward him. Her father won't. Cole's jaw tightened. Richard Whitmore can't fight perception. He's old school. Money can't outshine emotion, and right now, emotion's on my side. Down on Park Avenue, Richard watched the same news feed in silence. Ava and Daniel stood nearby, waiting for his reaction. The video played again, Grace crying, headlines screaming postpartum meltdown. She hasn't even spoken to the press, Ava said bitterly. They're fabricating everything. Richard turned off the TV. Then we stop reacting. We lead the story. He walked toward the massive window overlooking Central Park, the skyline slicing through the gray morning light. Find me every journalist they've paid, every burner account posting about my daughter. I want proof this was a deliberate campaign. Ava nodded. On it. Back at the hospital, Grace scrolled through her phone, her hands trembling. She saw comments calling her ungrateful, crazy, spoiled billionaire's daughter. Her stomach twisted. She'd survived an attempt on her life. Now they were killing her reputation. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. Careful what you tell your father. Cameras everywhere. She stared at the words until her vision blurred. For a moment, she wanted to give up. But then she heard her baby's soft cry. That sound pulled her back from the edge. When Richard arrived that afternoon, he found his daughter holding Noah, rocking him gently. Her eyes were red but steady. They're calling me insane, she whispered. He placed a hand on her shoulder. Let them. For now. For now? Because we're going to use their own narrative against them, he said, voice low. They want the world to see you as broken? Fine. We'll show them strength wrapped in grace. You'll speak when the time is right, and when you do, it will destroy them. Later that night in Lancaster Tower, Sloane walked into Cole's office carrying a tablet. Metrics are off the charts, she said. Sympathy up, stock stabilized, investors calm. Cole grinned, swirling the ice in his glass of whiskey. Good, keep feeding it. Sloane hesitated. There's something else. Someone's leaking internal emails. Tech team found traces of data extraction from the hospital logs. It's Whitmore's people. Cole's smile faded, then silenced them. I don't care how, she nodded but avoided his gaze. Something in his tone made her stomach twist. Cole wasn't just covering up anymore, he was planning his next strike. And as the city slept beneath its glittering towers, two wars raged in silence. One fought with power and one fought with truth. Only one would survive daylight. The city slept under a sheet of freezing rain, but in the basement of Lenox Hill Hospital, truth waited like a ghost trapped behind steel doors. It was 2 a.m. when Daniel Brooks and Ava Chen arrived, escorted by two private investigators hired by Richard Whitmore. Their coats dripped water onto the sterile tiles as they handed the hospital director a signed court order, quietly secured by one of Whitmore's lawyers. Access to the oxygen control room, Daniel said flatly. All logs, all surveillance, no copies withheld. The director hesitated. This could cost me my job. Then it'll cost someone else their freedom, Daniel replied. Inside the storage room, the air was heavy with disinfectant and rust. Rows of oxygen tanks lined the walls like silver soldiers. Ava knelt by the main valve and shined her flashlight over it. Scratches circled the knob, fresh, deliberate, hidden beneath a thin layer of oil. This isn't wear and tear, she murmured. Someone used a wrench recently. Daniel photographed every inch, his iPhone camera clicking in the silence. Then Ava pried off a loose metal cap. Inside, a tiny fiber from a red wool coat clung to the hinge. She froze. Red. Daniel glanced at her. Like Sloane's coat? Exactly like it, she said, sealing the fiber in a plastic bag. Ava connected her MacBook Pro to the hospital's internal network. Let's see the access footage. Most cameras showed static or corrupted timestamps, but one corner cam, angled toward the corridor, flickered to life. For 3 seconds, the reflection of a woman passed through the frosted glass of the supply door, hair in a bun, tall, wearing red. Ava zoomed in, enhanced, stabilized. The Cartier bracelet glinted under fluorescent light. That's her, Daniel whispered. That's Sloane Hart. They exchanged a look, the kind of look people share when the truth finally cuts deep enough to bleed. Daniel called Richard immediately. We've got physical evidence, a fiber, a reflection, timestamps matching the oxygen drop. On the other end, Richard's voice was cold steel. Bring it to me, quietly. No press yet. By dawn, the evidence lay spread across Richard's penthouse table. The Manhattan skyline behind him glowed blue with early morning. Grace, still weak but determined, sat across from her father. Her hands trembled as she looked at the photo of Sloane's reflection. That's her, she said softly. She was at the gala. She was always near Cole. Richard placed a hand over hers. This is the thread, Grace. We pull it carefully and the whole web will unravel. Ava pointed to another file. There's more. Dr. Hale's access card was used 5 minutes before Sloane entered the hall, meaning someone else was coordinating this. She wasn't alone. Grace's stomach turned. Cole. Richard didn't answer, but his silence was enough. Later that evening, Daniel returned to the hospital to secure witness statements. He found Elena Torres in the break room, sipping coffee, eyes hollow. They've reassigned me to night shifts only, she whispered. I think they know I talked. Daniel lowered his voice. You did the right thing. You're not alone. Outside, rain pounded the pavement. A black car idled near the curb, headlights dimmed. From inside, Sloane watched through tinted glass, her expression unreadable. She turned to the man sitting beside her, Cole Lancaster. They're digging, she said. Cole's lips curved into a smirk. Then let them dig. They'll never reach the bottom before I bury them. Back in the penthouse, Grace rocked her son gently, unaware of the storm tightening around her. The city lights flickered like warnings across the glass. The truth had been found, but truth alone was never enough. Now came the part where people started to disappear. The night before the Lancaster Dynamics board meeting, New York City pulsed like a nervous heart. Lights shimmered on the East River, horns echoed through the avenues, and somewhere on the edge of Brooklyn, Richard Whitmore prepared for battle. Not with rage, but with precision. Inside a private dining room at the River Café, the soft glow of candles bounced off the window, where the Brooklyn Bridge stretched across a curtain of fog. Seated opposite Richard was Eleanor Park, an independent board member, sharp-minded and calm, a woman who'd built her fortune in clean energy and her reputation on integrity. I know what you're asking me to do, she said, stirring her tea. To stand against the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation without public proof. That's suicide. Richard leaned forward, voice low but unwavering. It's not suicide if the truth walks in first. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, printed stills of Sloane Hart's reflection in the hospital corridor, the timestamp logs from Dr. Hale's access card, and the encrypted email Ava had decrypted. Eleanor studied them, her brow tightening. If this leaks before the board meeting, stock value will drop 20% overnight. Richard sipped his espresso, calm as a winter tide. I'm not leaking it. I'm presenting it to the board in private. I'm not here to humiliate Lancaster Dynamics. I'm here to save it from the man running it into hell. She looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. You're still the same Whitmore I remember. Too quiet until it's too late. He smiled faintly. This time, I intend to be right on time. Meanwhile, uptown at Grace's penthouse, the mood was softer, but no less heavy. Grace sat in a rocking chair, her son Noah asleep in her arms. On the side table sat her Kindle, open to Atomic Habits, a small piece of calm in the chaos. She read the line, "Every action you take is a vote for the person you wish to become," she whispered to herself. Then let tomorrow be my first vote. Richard arrived home just before midnight. Grace looked up as he entered, exhaustion shadowing her face. You met Eleanor? She asked. He nodded. She'll do what's right. But Cole will fight back hard. He'll try to discredit me, maybe even you. Be ready for that. Grace looked at him, eyes steady. Let him. I've been discredited before. This time, I have nothing left to lose. For the first time in weeks, Richard smiled. Not with pride, but recognition. His daughter was no longer just surviving. She was becoming dangerous in her truth. Across the city, in the top-floor suite of Lancaster Tower, Cole poured himself a drink. Tomorrow they'll try to corner me, he told Sloane, pacing by the panoramic window that framed the Manhattan skyline. But they forget who built this empire. Every board member here owes me something. Sloane hesitated. You can't buy everyone forever, Cole. He turned, eyes cold. No, but I can make them afraid to cross me. She watched him quietly, a flicker of doubt in her expression. She had chosen the wrong side, and for the first time, she knew it. Down in the penthouse garage, Daniel checked the Mercedes, ensuring security was tight. He turned to Richard. Tomorrow's meeting could get ugly. Richard adjusted his cufflinks. Then we'll meet them with elegance. When he stepped into the elevator, the city seemed to hum beneath him. Alive, electric, dangerous. Above the skyline, a storm gathered, low and heavy, reflecting in the glass towers like molten silver. Grace kissed her son goodnight and whispered, "Whatever happens tomorrow, the truth walks with us." Tomorrow would not just decide who ran Lancaster Dynamics, it would decide who survived it. Morning broke like steel, cold, sharp, and merciless. The rain had stopped, but the city's towers still dripped from the storm, mirroring the tension that hung over Lancaster Tower. At 9 a.m., the 48th floor boardroom glowed under white lights. The skyline of Manhattan stretched endlessly beyond the glass. A long oval table gleamed like a mirror of power. Around it sat 12 board members, their expressions guarded, their eyes darting between two men. Cole Lancaster, the reigning CEO, and Richard Whitmore, the uninvited ghost from the company's founding past. Cole adjusted his Mont Blanc pen, letting it tap rhythmically against the mahogany. "Before we start," he said smoothly, "I want to make something clear. I am here as CEO, not as a husband under emotional attack. The recent gossip surrounding my wife's medical incident has been exaggerated and weaponized. I will not tolerate slander inside my company." The words echoed with false dignity. Sloane Hart sat beside him, head high, wearing a cream silk blouse that matched her icy calm. Her Cartier bracelet flashed each time she flipped a page of the PR report. Richard leaned back, unshaken. "Then let's talk facts, not gossip." He opened a black leather folder and slid a series of photographs across the table, each one time-stamped, each one undeniable. Ava Chen stood behind him, laptop in hand. "These are verified hospital logs," she said clearly. "Access card VHale admin used at 2:13 a.m., 3 minutes before Mrs. Whitmore's oxygen failure. Surveillance footage shows an unauthorized entry. A female in a red coat, identified as Sloane Hart." Gasps rippled across the room. Eleanor Park, the independent board member, frowned deeply. "Sloane, is this true?" Sloane's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous. I was nowhere near the hospital that night." Ava pressed a key. The projection on the glass wall changed. Sloane's reflection, crystal clear, captured in the corridor's frosted window. The Cartier bracelet glinted unmistakably. Silence swallowed the room. Cole rose from his chair, voice raised but controlled. "This proves nothing. Anyone could have." Richard cut him off. "Access the oxygen line? Ordered a medical override under your own digital signature?" A murmur broke out. Board members exchanged nervous glances. Eleanor leaned forward. "Cole, we've reviewed your private directives. One of them, client private intervention, was signed by you. Would you care to explain that?" Cole's mask finally cracked. "You think I'd try to kill my wife? You think I'd risk my company for that?" Richard stood, his voice quiet but lethal. "You risked it the moment you forgot what power costs when it's unchecked." Cole turned red, slamming his hand on the table. "You think your money can control this board?" "No," Richard said calmly, "but the truth can." Ava pressed another key. The audio file began to play. Sloane's voice, trembling, recorded on her phone the night before she fled the hospital. Cole said, "Don't let her deliver tonight. He has a meeting tomorrow." He said, quote, "Make sure the timing's right." The sound of Cole's voice followed, cold, impatient, unmistakable. Sloane froze, realizing too late what had just surfaced. Her eyes darted to Cole, who stared at her in disbelief. "You recorded me?" he hissed. Eleanor Park rose from her seat. "Effective immediately, I'm calling for a vote of temporary suspension pending investigation." Hands raised. One after another, 10 out of 12, the gavel fell. Cole's empire collapsed in a heartbeat. Security entered quietly. Cole's Rolex gleamed as he clenched his fists. "You'll regret this," he spat, glaring at Richard. Richard's gaze didn't waver. "I already did once, not again." As the doors closed behind Cole, the rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, inevitable. Grace watched from her father's office across the street, holding her son and whispering, "It's over." But deep down, she knew. For men like Cole Lancaster, nothing is ever truly over. The city had gone quiet after the storm. News outlets buzzed with speculation about Cole Lancaster's suspension, but no one outside the boardroom knew the full story. Inside the Whitmore penthouse, the lights were low, the air warm, and Grace Whitmore sat at her desk, pen in hand, staring at a blank sheet of paper. Her baby Noah slept peacefully in a cradle nearby. The faint hum of the city below was the only sound breaking the silence. She picked up her Mont Blanc pen, a gift from her father when she turned 21, and began to write. Not an email, not a statement for the press, but a letter to her son. My sweet Noah, when you're old enough to understand, you'll hear things about the night you were born. Some will call it an accident. Some will say it was fate. But the truth is, it was neither. It was survival. Yours, mine, ours. Her handwriting trembled. She paused, eyes filling with tears. I thought love could fix everything. I thought if I worked harder, forgave more, stayed quiet longer, he would see me. But power doesn't see love, it consumes it. She stopped, breathing deeply, her reflection wavering in the polished wood. For so long she had lived in someone else's story. Cole's narrative, Cole's image, Cole's world. Now, for the first time, she was writing her own. Down the hall, Richard knocked softly before entering. He looked older, more human than he had in years. "You're awake," he said, noticing the letter. Grace smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd leave something behind for him, just in case." Richard walked over and sat across from her. "You won't need to leave anything behind, Grace. You'll be here to tell him yourself." She nodded, but didn't stop writing. "You always think you have time, Dad. Then one day, someone cuts your oxygen, and you realize you've been running on borrowed air your whole life." He said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence was the apology he could never articulate. On the table beside her sat a small velvet pouch. Grace reached inside and pulled out her wedding ring. The platinum band Cole had placed on her finger under the golden chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton. It used to symbolize forever. Now it was a relic of control. She placed it in Richard's palm. "I'm done wearing lies." He closed his hand around it. "Then let's start with truth." Later that morning, Ava Chen arrived with new documents. "The forensic audit is ready," she announced. "Cole's offshore accounts, private payments to Dr. Pa Hale, and something else, unauthorized fund transfers to Sloan Hart 3 days before your labor." Grace inhaled sharply. He paid her. Ava nodded. "To keep the press quiet, to erase surveillance backups, but she kept copies. I think she's scared now." Richard glanced at Grace. "Fear makes people dangerous, but it also makes them useful." Grace stood, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, the city's gray light spilling through the window. "Then let her talk. Let everyone talk. I'm done hiding." That evening she dressed simply, a white blouse, no jewelry, her hair loose. She looked into the mirror and almost didn't recognize herself. The fragility was gone. What remained was quiet strength. She turned to Noah, now awake and smiling, his tiny fingers reaching for her. "You saved me," she whispered. "You made me remember who I am." Outside, the world still called her unstable, broken, the CEO's tragic wife. But Grace Whitmore no longer cared. She folded her letter, sealed it, and placed it in a box marked "For Noah, when he's ready." Tomorrow, she would speak for the first time, not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her story. And once she began, there would be no stopping her. The studio lights glowed warm and soft, washing over Grace Whitmore as she sat in front of the camera. It wasn't a talk show or a glossy news segment. It was something smaller, more intimate. A quiet interview filmed by an independent journalist her father trusted. No script, no PR spin, just her, a single mic, and the truth she had waited her whole life to speak. The journalist adjusted his Sony camera, nodding. "Ready when you are, Mrs. Whitmore." She smiled faintly. "Please, just Grace." He pressed record. For a long moment she said nothing. The hum of New York outside filled the silence. Car horns, wind, life continuing, unaware that the woman on screen was about to shatter a powerful man's empire. "When I went into labor," she began softly, "I thought it would be the most beautiful moment of my life. It almost became my last." Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice stayed steady. "The machine that was keeping me alive, my oxygen, was tampered with. Someone wanted to make sure I didn't walk out of that hospital." The camera operator froze for a second but kept rolling. Grace continued, her gaze unwavering. "My husband, Cole Lancaster, told the world it was an accident. His PR team turned my near death into a brand. But accidents don't happen with access cards and paid silence." Across the city, in his penthouse, Cole watched the live stream on his MacBook Pro, whiskey glass in hand. His knuckles whitened as her voice echoed through the speakers. "I stayed quiet because I was afraid," she said. "Afraid no one would believe me. Afraid of the headlines, the lawyers, the money. But then I remembered. I almost died trying to bring my son into this world. What else could they take from me?" A single tear slid down her cheek, catching the light like glass. At the back of the room, Richard Whitmore and Ava Chen watched silently. Richard's expression was unreadable, but pride flickered in his eyes. Ava typed furiously on her MacBook, tracking engagement. Within minutes, Grace's name was trending across Twitter and YouTube. Grace Whitmore speaks. Truth over power, the Oxygen Files. Grace's tone softened. This isn't just about me. It's about every woman told to stay quiet for the sake of someone else's reputation. Power doesn't protect, it destroys when unchecked. In the control booth, the journalist whispered, "This is gold." But for Grace, it wasn't gold. It was release. Every word lifted a weight from her chest, every sentence reclaiming a piece of herself. At that exact moment, Sloane Hart sat alone in her high-rise apartment, watching the interview in horror. Her phone buzzed with messages from journalists, lawyers, and board members. She poured herself a glass of wine, hands shaking. On the screen, Grace's image filled the room, serene, defiant, unstoppable. "She's really doing it," Sloane whispered. When the camera cut off, Grace exhaled deeply. "Was that enough?" she asked quietly. Richard placed a hand on her shoulder. "It was perfect." Ava smiled. "You didn't just tell your story, you made the world listen." Later that evening, as the video racked up millions of views, Grace stood by the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the city lights shimmering below like 1,000 small hopes. Her phone vibrated again. Calls from reporters, women thanking her, strangers saying they finally had courage to speak. But one message froze her blood. It came from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone public, Grace. Accidents can happen twice." Her heart skipped. She turned off the phone, walked over to Noah's crib, and kissed his forehead. Then she whispered to the night, "You can threaten me all you want, but I don't scare that easily anymore." Somewhere in the dark, a shadow watched her video on loop, eyes cold, calculating. For the first time, Cole Lancaster wasn't just losing control, he was afraid. The morning after Grace's interview aired, Manhattan hummed like a live wire. Every news outlet replayed her words, dissecting each phrase, speculating on the truth behind the Lancaster dynasty. Stock prices trembled, investors panicked, and journalists camped outside Lancaster Tower, waiting for Cole Lancaster's response. But inside the sleek glass building, the real battle was happening underground, in a digital war room filled with tension and caffeine. Ava Chen and Daniel Brooks had been awake all night, sorting through the mountain of data recovered from Dr. Victor Hale's encrypted drives. "Half these files are decoys," Ava muttered, her fingers flying over the MacBook Pro keyboard. "Whoever set this up was paranoid." Daniel leaned over her shoulder, eyes scanning the code. "Paranoid or guilty?" She looked up. "Both." After an hour of decryption, a single folder appeared. Project Respira. Ava double-clicked. Documents filled the screen. Financial transfers, private directives, and an internal memo signed by Cole Lancaster. Her pulse quickened. "Got it," Daniel frowned. "What's Respira?" Ava opened one file, a directive sent from Cole's corporate email to Dr. Hale. "Ensure medical timeline aligns with PR schedule. Subject must remain under observation until clearance." Her stomach turned. He treated his wife's labor like a media rollout. Daniel's jaw clenched, and he tried to erase her when the timing went wrong. Before Ava could respond, her laptop pinged, a remote access attempt. Someone was trying to wipe the files in real time. "Damn it, someone's in our system," she shouted, typing furiously. "They found us." Daniel unplugged the Ethernet cable, killing the connection. "Copy what you can. We move now." Ava transferred the files to a secure USB drive, tucking it inside her coat pocket. The rest of the data blinked out, replaced by a single message: "Stop playing detective." Meanwhile, at his penthouse, Cole stood in front of a giant TV wall displaying market data. His company's stock had dropped 12% overnight. Sloane Hart entered quietly, pale, clutching her phone. "They've got the files," she said. "Your name's on them, Cole." He didn't turn around. "Then burn everything. Hale's computers, backup servers, all of it. If Whitmore wants war, I'll give him one." Sloane hesitated. "You can't win this with fire." He turned, eyes burning with fury. "Watch me." Across town, Grace and Richard met Eleanor Park at a quiet corner booth in the Plaza Hotel. The world outside roared with gossip, but inside the suite, the air was calm and deliberate. Eleanor set down her phone. "I just received an anonymous tip. Lancaster's digital archives are being wiped as we speak. Whatever evidence you had may not exist tomorrow. Richard's jaw tightened. Then we move tonight. Grace looked between them. Move how? Ava and Daniel burst in minutes later, rain-soaked and breathless. Ava placed the small USB drive on the table. This is what's left. It ties him to everything, the oxygen tampering, the hush payments, the rebranding plan. But someone tried to delete it while I was copying. They know we have it. Richard stared at the tiny drive like it was a loaded weapon. Then this is the bullet, he said quietly. Grace clenched her fists. So what do we do with it? Richard looked up at his daughter, eyes cold but certain. We don't leak it. We show it, at the hearing, in front of the board, under oath. Let the world see who he really is. Ava exhaled, relieved but wary. You realize Cole won't go down quietly. Richard smiled faintly. Neither do Whitmore's. That night, while the city flickered beneath a bruised sky, a small fire erupted in the basement of Lancaster Tower. Hard drives melted. Servers hissed. Years of secrets turned to smoke. But far from the flames, in a locked briefcase on Richard Whitmore's desk, the final copy of Project Respira glowed faintly on one untouched USB. The Empire thought it had buried its sins. It hadn't realized the evidence was already walking toward its reckoning. The night sky over Manhattan was ink black, streaked with silver rain. Lightning cracked against the skyline as if the city itself were splitting in two. Inside a glass penthouse overlooking the East River, Sloane Hart stood barefoot, wine glass trembling in her hand. She'd just watched the evening news, the words Project Respira flashing across the ticker like a curse. They knew. Her phone buzzed relentlessly, calls from lawyers, investors, reporters, but she ignored them all. The only message she cared about was from Cole Lancaster. She had texted him an hour ago, "We need to talk." No reply. Then, as if summoned by guilt, the private elevator chimed. Cole stepped out, drenched in rain, eyes wild. His usually tailored perfection was gone, tie loose, shirt half-buttoned, rage written across every line of his face. "You told them," he hissed. Sloane's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" He slammed the door behind him. "Don't play dumb, Sloane. You're the only one who had access to the files. You gave Whitmore the evidence." "I didn't," she snapped, setting her glass down. "But maybe if you hadn't turned your wife's hospital bed into a PR stunt, there'd be nothing to leak." Cole stalked closer, voice low, dangerous. "You're not innocent. Don't forget, you were there. You turned that valve. You helped me." She froze. The sound of his accusation filled the room like smoke. "You told me it was just a pressure adjustment," she whispered. "You said it was safe." He smirked. "You wanted to please me. Don't pretend you didn't enjoy the power." Tears welled in her eyes. "I risked everything for you, Cole. My career, my name." "Your name was nothing until I gave it meaning," he spat. "You're a prop. You always were." Something in her snapped. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a USB drive, the backup copy she had secretly kept from the Project Respira files. She tossed it onto the table. "Then maybe it's time the world sees what kind of monster you really are." For a heartbeat, Cole said nothing. Then his laugh broke the silence, low, cold, cruel. "You think that will save you? You're in this as deep as I am. You'll burn too." He lunged for the USB. She grabbed it first, backing away, her voice trembling but defiant. "Not if I hand it to the right people first. The FBI is already watching your accounts. They'll believe me." Cole's eyes darkened. "You think Whitmore will protect you? He'll use you, then discard you. Just like I did." The words hit like a slap. For years, she'd convinced herself she was different, that Cole's affection meant power. Now she saw the truth. She was disposable. Cole took a step closer, then another. She clutched the USB tighter, heart pounding. "Stay back," she warned. He paused, lips curling. "Don't worry, Sloane. I'm not going to hurt you." He turned toward the door, his voice calm again, almost charming. "You'll destroy yourself just fine." When the elevator doors closed behind him, Sloane's legs gave out. She sank to the floor, trembling, realizing that the man she'd loved was no longer human, if he ever had been. Moments later, her phone lit up with a new message, from a blocked number. "If you want to live, deliver the drive to Park Avenue before sunrise." She stared at it, pulse racing. Whitmore. It had to be. Sloane grabbed her coat and slipped the USB into her pocket. Outside, thunder rolled across the river. She looked once more at the city she'd helped deceive, whispering to herself, "I'm done being his weapon." For the first time in years, she wasn't running from guilt. She was running toward redemption. But in Cole Lancaster's world, redemption always came with blood. The following morning, the storm clouds hung low over Manhattan, heavy as the tension inside Lancaster Tower. The building that once symbolized dominance now pulsed with anxiety, employees whispering in hallways, phones buzzing with half-truths, the air thick with corporate fear. On the 48th floor, the board of directors had gathered again in the executive conference room. Gone were the champagne smiles and glassy confidence. Today, power was on trial. At the far end of the table sat Eleanor Park, now acting as interim chairwoman. Her presence was calm but unyielding. Beside her, a stack of documents bore the Whitmore seal, evidence from Project Respira, authenticated, time-stamped, and devastating. The door opened. Richard Whitmore entered, accompanied by Ava Chen and Daniel Brooks. He didn't speak right away. He simply placed a silver briefcase on the table and opened it with a quiet click. Inside was a small MacBook Air connected to a projector. On screen appeared the damning sequence. Cole Lancaster's signed directives, payments to Dr. Victor Hale, transfers to Sloan Hart, and digital footprints leading to the oxygen tampering. Eleanor took a breath. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at is not speculation. It's a chain of deliberate actions ordered by our CEO. Actions that nearly cost the life of an innocent woman and her child. A murmur rippled through the board. One director whispered, "If this goes public, we're finished." Richard's voice was steady. "You're finished only if you protect him." Suddenly, the doors burst open. Cole Lancaster walked in, flanked by two bodyguards, wearing his usual confidence-like armor. His Rolex caught the morning light as he set his briefcase down with a thud. "Having meetings without me, Eleanor?" he asked with a smile too sharp to be friendly. "This is an emergency session," she replied coolly. "Your presence wasn't required." Cole laughed. "And yet here I am, because it's my company." Richard rose from his chair. "Not anymore." Cole's eyes narrowed. "You think a few forged documents and a sob story from my wife can dethrone me?" Ava pressed play on a video file. Sloan Hart's face filled the screen, tired, pale, but resolute. Her recorded statement began to play. "This is Sloan Hart, former PR director. Everything you've heard is true. Cole Lancaster ordered the oxygen tampering at Lenox Hill Hospital. He told me to make it look like a medical malfunction. I was there, I saw it happen, and I can no longer live with the guilt." The room froze. Cole's color drained. "You think anyone will believe a woman trying to save herself?" Eleanor lifted a paper. "We already verified the footage metadata. It's authentic." Cole's charm finally cracked, rage flickering through his eyes. "You're all making a mistake," he hissed. "No," Richard said. "You made the mistake the moment you treated a human life like a marketing opportunity." Eleanor stood, voice clear. "The board votes today. Effective immediately, Cole Lancaster is removed as CEO of Lancaster Dynamics. All assets and responsibilities are transferred to an interim management council until federal authorities complete their investigation." Hands rose one by one, 11 votes to remove. Cole laughed bitterly. "You can't erase me. You need me." Richard stepped forward, calm as ice. "You were never the company, Cole. You were its infection." Security entered quietly, escorting him out. As the elevator doors closed, Cole turned back, his smile chilling. "This isn't over, Whitmore. Empires don't die, they evolve." Downstairs, rain began to fall again, washing the city in silver streaks. Eleanor exhaled, the weight of history pressing on her shoulders. Richard turned to Ava. "File everything with the Attorney General. By tonight, the world will know the truth." Grace watched the live feed from home, holding Noah close. For the first time since that night in the hospital, she felt air fill her lungs completely. Cole Lancaster had fallen, but monsters rarely stayed buried. The storm had passed, but thunder still lingered in the distance. Rain drummed against the courthouse steps like a metronome counting down justice. 2 days had passed since Cole Lancaster's removal as CEO, but the war was far from over. What was left of Lancaster Dynamics was now under investigation, and the eyes of New York and the world were fixed on the case that had torn open the walls of power. Inside the New York County Courthouse, tension hung heavy. Reporters jostled for space outside the marble pillars, their microphones raised like weapons. Flashbulbs erupted as Grace Whitmore, dressed in a simple black coat, stepped out of the car with her father beside her. She carried no jewelry, no pretense, just calm determination. Mrs. Whitmore, a reporter shouted, "Are you seeking revenge or justice?" Grace paused, meeting the flashing cameras head-on. "Justice," she said softly. "Revenge is for the guilty. I'm here for the truth." Inside the courtroom, Assistant District Attorney Linda Crow organized her files while Ava Chen connected her laptop to the courtroom monitor. The evidence was ready: the Project Respira documents, the audio recordings, the statement from Sloan Hart, and Dr. Hale's testimony. Every line pointed to one man, Cole Lancaster. Cole entered moments later, handcuffed, flanked by marshals. He still wore his arrogance like armor, but his face had lost its polish. No tailored suit could hide the exhaustion under his eyes. He scanned the courtroom, his gaze locking on Grace. She didn't flinch. The judge, Honor Margaret Fields, called the room to order. State versus Cole Lancaster, case number 8943B. Charges include attempted manslaughter, medical interference, and corporate conspiracy. Cole smirked as if the words meant nothing. "Your Honor," his lawyer began smoothly, "my client is the victim of a family vendetta." Linda interrupted, her tone sharp. "The victim is Mrs. Whitmore, who nearly died while giving birth because her husband tampered with her oxygen supply for publicity control. The evidence is clear." A hush fell as the first exhibit appeared on screen, the digital signature authorizing controlled intervention, Project Respira. The date matched Grace's labor. The author, Cole Lancaster. The next clip played, Sloan Hart's recorded confession. Her voice filled the courtroom, breaking slightly as she spoke. "He said to delay her delivery until morning. When I told him the contractions had started early, he said, 'Then stop it. We're not ready for cameras.'" Cole's lawyer objected, shouting about coercion in context. The judge overruled him. Then came the final blow. Dr. Victor Hale, pale and trembling, took the stand. His voice cracked as he confessed, "He paid me $250,000 through a subsidiary account. He told me to make sure the oxygen alarm didn't interrupt the narrative. I didn't know it would go that far." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Grace closed her eyes, a single tear slipping free, not of sorrow but release. Cole slammed his hands on the table, voice rising. "You think you can destroy me with lies? I built this city's trust. Without me, you're all nobodies." The judge's gavel struck hard. "Order." Richard leaned forward, speaking just loud enough for Cole to hear. "You built nothing. You borrowed integrity until it broke." Cole's mask shattered, his composure dissolved into fury. "You'll regret this, Whitmore, you and your broken daughter." But Grace stood, her voice calm and clear. "No, Cole, the only broken thing in this room is your soul." The courtroom fell silent. Even the cameras stopped clicking. Judge Fields adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Lancaster, you will remain in federal custody pending trial. Bail is denied." Cole's expression went blank as marshals took him by the arm. As they led him away, Grace whispered to her father, "It's finally ending." Richard looked at her gently. "No, sweetheart, it's finally beginning, the rebuilding." Outside, the storm that had haunted their lives for months began to break. But beneath the clearing sky, the battle for redemption had just begun. It was the morning of the public hearing, an event that would define not only the fate of Cole Lancaster, but also the reputation of every institution that had protected him. The courthouse plaza was a sea of umbrellas and flashing cameras. Reporters shouted over each other, the buzz of drones capturing every angle for live feeds across the world. Inside, the air was electric. Rows of journalists filled the benches. Investors, lawyers, and even employees of Lancaster Dynamics packed the gallery. The world wanted blood, or at least truth. Grace Whitmore sat at the prosecution table beside Assistant District Attorney Linda Crow, her hands steady despite the swarm of lights and whispers. She wore a plain white dress, symbolic, pure, unshakable. Across from her, Cole Lancaster adjusted his tie with that same cold precision, but his confidence was cracking. His eyes darted to the cameras, to Grace, then back to the floor. The judge entered, gavel striking once. "This hearing is now in session." Linda stood. "Your Honor, we call Mrs. Grace Whitmore as our first witness." Grace rose slowly. The walk to the witness stand felt endless. Every click of her heels echoed like thunder. When she sat down, she took a deep breath and met the judge's gaze. "Mrs. Whitmore," Linda began gently, "can you tell the court what happened the night you gave birth to your son?" Grace nodded. "It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life, but I remember the monitor beeping slower and slower. I couldn't breathe. I saw the nurses panic, but no one knew why the oxygen wasn't working. Later I found out it wasn't broken. Someone had turned it off. A wave of murmurs swept the room. Cole shifted in his seat, jaw tightening. Linda continued, "Did you ever suspect your husband was involved?" Grace hesitated, then spoke clearly. "No, not then. I trusted him. I thought he loved me, but love doesn't put profit before life." Cole's lawyer jumped to his feet. "Objection, emotional speculation." The judge waved him down. "Overruled. Continue." Grace looked directly at Cole. "He didn't just betray me. He betrayed the idea of family, of decency. He thought he could control perception, even death itself. But he forgot one thing. The truth always breathes." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. Linda nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore." As Grace stepped down, cameras flashed furiously. The room felt alive, charged with something more powerful than fear, justice beginning to breathe again. Next, Elena Torres, the nurse who had saved Grace's life, took the stand. Her uniform was crisp, her hands folded nervously. "Miss Torres," Linda asked, "can you confirm what you witnessed that night?" Elena swallowed hard. "I was monitoring Mrs. Whitmore's vitals when the oxygen alarm went off. When I checked the system, the valve had been turned. That's not a malfunction, it's human." "And whose access card was used that night?" Elena's voice broke. "Dr. Victor Hale's. But I know he wasn't alone. I saw a woman leave the room just before the alarm. She was wearing a red coat." Gasps filled the gallery. Every eye turned toward Sloane Hart, who sat in the back, head bowed, a silent reminder of complicity. Linda finished calmly. "So you're saying this was coordinated?" Elena nodded. "Yes, this wasn't an accident. It was a plan." Outside, the world erupted. News networks cut into live broadcasts. Social media exploded with one name, Grace Whitmore. "Stand with Grace, truth overpower the oxygen files." Cole's composure finally cracked. He slammed his hand on the table, shouting, "This is a circus. You're all feeding off my downfall." The judge's gavel hit hard. "Mr. Lancaster, one more outburst and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Grace turned to him, her voice quiet but deadly. "You built your empire on silence, Cole, but silence ends today." The cameras captured it all. The woman who almost died, now the voice that would bury the man who tried to kill her. The courthouse was silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the old clock above the judge's bench. The hearing had dragged into its second week, each testimony carving deeper wounds into the empire Cole Lancaster had built. But this morning felt different. There was a stillness, an anticipation that something irreversible was about to happen. Ava Chen sat at the prosecution table, her MacBook Pro connected to the projector. The evidence she had uncovered over sleepless nights was finally ready to be shown, the final, unbreakable proof. She looked at Grace Whitmore, who gave her a small nod of courage. When the judge entered, the gavel struck like thunder. "The court will now hear the next piece of evidence." Ava rose. "Your Honor, this is a newly authenticated digital recording, extracted from Mr. Lancaster's iCloud backup, timestamped the night before the incident at Lenox Hill Hospital." Cole's lawyer immediately stood. "Objection. Unlawful seizure of private data." Judge Fields glanced down. "Was the warrant filed?" Ava handed over the document. "Yes, Your Honor, signed 3 days ago by the federal magistrate." "Proceed," the judge said. Ava pressed play. Through the speakers came a faint rustling, then a familiar voice. Cole's, calm, calculated, chillingly casual. "Don't let her deliver tonight," he said. "I have an investors meeting in the morning. Push it back. We'll deal with the PR later." Another voice, Sloane Hart's, trembled in reply. "Cole, she's in active labor. That's not something you can control." Cole's voice hardened. "Then make her wait." The courtroom froze. Even the reporters stopped typing. Ava turned off the audio, letting silence hang heavy like judgment itself. "This recording," she said quietly, "was saved automatically to Mr. Lancaster's cloud account. Metadata confirms its authenticity. This was premeditated interference with a medical procedure." Cole's face drained of color. His attorney whispered frantically, but he didn't hear him. His eyes flicked to Grace. She was staring back, not with anger anymore, but with sorrow. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Lancaster, do you deny that as your voice?" He hesitated, then muttered, "It's been edited." Ava tapped a key. The waveform appeared on the big screen. "Forensic experts have verified zero manipulation. The voice print matches Mr. Lancaster's 99.97%. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. From the back, Sloane Hart stood up suddenly. Her voice wavered, but the words were clear. "It's real." All eyes turned to her. Tears streaked her face. "I was there. I recorded it because I knew one day he'd try to destroy me too. I didn't stop him, but I won't hide anymore." The confession hit like a bomb. Cole shot her a look of pure hatred. "You think they'll believe a disgraced PR director?" He spat. Sloane met his glare. "They don't have to believe me. They just heard you." Judge Fields banged the gavel again to quiet the chaos. "This court will recess for 1 hour before closing arguments. Security, ensure both witnesses remain under protection." As the room emptied, Grace sat still, her hands clasped tightly together. Her father leaned close. "It's over," he whispered. But Grace shook her head. "Not yet. Truth doesn't end things, it exposes them." When Cole was escorted out, he passed her seat. For the first time, he looked small, stripped of power, stripped of polish, stripped of the image he'd worshipped. "You'll regret this, Grace," he hissed. "You always need someone to save you." She didn't even look up. Not anymore. Outside, the courthouse steps were flooded with journalists shouting her name. But for Grace, their noise faded into nothing. She looked up at the gray sky, breathing deeply, the same way she couldn't that night in the hospital. Only this time, the air was hers. The truth had finally spoken, and the man who silenced her once was now deafened by his own words. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder, lenses clicking like gunfire. The world had come to witness the downfall of Cole Lancaster, the man once hailed as the golden boy of Manhattan business, a man who now sat shackled at the defense table, his empire turned to ashes. Judge Fields entered, her black robe billowing as silence fell. This court will now hear the verdict. Every breath seemed to stop. Grace Whitmore sat in the front row, her father's hand resting on her shoulder. Ava Chen and Daniel Brooks stood beside them. Even Sloane Hart, now under protective custody, was present, her face pale, her eyes hollow. Cole stared ahead, unblinking. The arrogance that once defined him had dissolved into something colder, desperation. The judge's voice was steady, almost merciful. After reviewing the evidence, the Project Respira documentation, the recorded directive and testimonies from witnesses including Sloane Hart and Dr. Victor Hale, this court finds the defendant, Cole Anthony Lancaster, guilty on all charges: attempted manslaughter, corporate conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A reporter dropped his pen. Cole's attorney slumped back in defeat. Cole's jaw tightened. "This is a farce," he hissed under his breath. "You can't cage brilliance." The judge continued, ignoring him. "You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Your corporate holdings will be liquidated, and the proceeds directed to the Whitmore Foundation for Maternal Safety." Grace's heart skipped. The foundation, her foundation, was now funded by the very man who tried to end her life. Cole stood abruptly. "You think this will save her?" he shouted, pointing at Grace. "She's weak. She'll fall apart without me." Grace rose slowly, turning to face him. Her voice, calm and steady, cut through the noise. "You tried to end me, Cole, but you only ended yourself." Security moved toward him, but Cole laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that filled the chamber. "You'll never escape me, Grace. You're tied to my name forever." The judge's gavel struck hard. "Remove the defendant." As marshals led him away, flashes erupted. The cameras followed every step. The former king of Lancaster dynamics, now reduced to a man in chains. Outside, the crowd roared, not in anger, but in something closer to catharsis. Grace felt her father's arm wrap around her shoulders. "It's over," he said softly. But she knew it wasn't over. It was transformation. Later that afternoon, a press conference was held on the steps of the courthouse. Grace stood behind a podium, microphones pointed like spears, the Manhattan skyline gleaming behind her. "I didn't fight this battle for revenge," she began, voice steady despite the tremor of exhaustion beneath it. "I fought because silence kills. It kills truth, it kills trust, and it nearly killed me." Reporters scribbled frantically as she continued. "Power without accountability is violence, and the women who survive it, who speak after being told to disappear, deserve more than sympathy. They deserve justice." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras captured the tears she tried to blink away. Beside her, Eleanor Park handed her a folder. "The Attorney General's office has approved your foundation. You're its director now. Grace looked at the document, then at her father, who smiled for the first time in months. You built this from pain, he said quietly. Now build hope from it. As she walked away from the courthouse, the city shimmered under the golden afternoon sun. She passed a newsstand. The headline read, "The CEO who lost everything, and the woman who found herself." Grace paused, staring at the words. Then she whispered to herself, "No, I didn't find myself. I rebuilt her." And somewhere behind the prison walls, Cole Lancaster watched the same headline, his empire gone, but his hatred burning like a dying star refusing to fade. A full year had passed since the trial, yet the echoes of that courtroom still lingered in Grace Whitmore's mind. The city had changed, and so had she. The name Lancaster no longer shadowed her. It was a chapter closed, a scar that no longer bled. Now sunlight spilled gently across her new office on Park Avenue, where the gold plaque on the glass door read, "Whitmore Foundation for Maternal Safety." Inside, the walls were lined with photos of mothers and children whose lives the foundation had already helped save. Grace stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the Manhattan skyline glitter in the morning light. Behind her, Ava Chen typed at her desk, while Daniel Brooks discussed security protocols with the team. Their loyalty had never wavered. Richard Whitmore, though mostly retired now, still visited often, usually bringing a fresh Starbucks latte and quiet fatherly advice. "Media wants an update," Ava said, glancing up from her screen. "CNN's requesting an interview. They want to feature you as one of New York's most influential women of the year." Grace smiled faintly. "Influence isn't what saved me. People did." Just then, the door opened and Richard entered, holding a small velvet box. His silver hair gleamed under the light, and for the first time in years he looked truly peaceful. "Morning, sweetheart," he said, placing the box on her desk. "It's from Tiffany's, a proper reopening gift." Grace chuckled. "Dad, you don't have to. Open it." Inside was a delicate platinum pendant shaped like a heartbeat. She ran her fingers over it, emotion catching in her throat. "It's a reminder," Richard said softly, "that yours kept going when it almost didn't." She hugged him tightly, something they'd both learned to do again after years of distance. Later that afternoon, Grace visited the Lenox Hill Hospital for the first time since that night. The staff greeted her warmly, many of them emotional. Elena Torres, now head nurse, showed her the new wing funded by the Whitmore Foundation, modern equipment, emergency protocols, and most importantly, safeguards against tampering. Elena smiled. "Every life saved here now carries your story, Grace." Grace looked around, her eyes glistening. "No, Elena. It carries ours." As she walked down the hallway, she paused outside the same delivery room where everything had once gone wrong. The sound of a baby's cry echoed faintly from inside. For a second, time folded back. She was there again, gasping for air, fighting for both their lives. But this time the memory didn't crush her. It made her grateful. That evening, she returned home to her apartment overlooking Central Park. The sunset painted the sky in orange and rose. Little Noah, now walking, toddled toward her with his favorite toy train. "Mommy," he squealed, arms open wide. She knelt down, lifting him into her arms, his laughter melting away the last ghosts of pain. On the shelf behind them, her old wedding ring sat encased in a glass box, not as a symbol of regret, but as proof of survival. Her phone buzzed, an email notification from the Whitmore Foundation's inbox. The subject line read, "Grant Request, Women's Shelter San Francisco." She smiled, already planning the next step of expansion. Outside, the city glowed. The same city that had nearly buried her, now carrying her name with respect. As night fell, Grace stood on her balcony holding Noah close, the Tiffany pendant resting over her heart. She whispered, "You saved me, my love, and now we'll save others." Below, the traffic hummed like a lullaby. Somewhere far away, behind concrete walls and iron bars, Cole Lancaster stared out of his prison window at the same skyline, a ghost of a man haunted by the woman he couldn't destroy. Grace looked up at the stars and smiled softly. Because the story didn't end with vengeance. It ended with healing, legacy, and a woman reborn. Trolivit content true of UK Eldonoi. So that's how our story ends, or maybe how healing truly begins. If you're still here right now, my friend, then something in Grace's journey must have touched your heart. Maybe her pain, maybe her strength, or maybe the moment she finally chose peace over revenge. And that says something about you too. Life will break us in ways we never expect. But as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the obstacle is the way. Every scar, every betrayal, every night we thought we wouldn't survive, those moments shape the calm within us. Like grace, we can turn our pain into purpose, our wounds into wisdom. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means learning to breathe again, even after someone once tried to steal your air. So if this story moved you, take a second to reflect on your own strength. Maybe share it with someone who's still fighting their way back to light. And if you believe in stories that remind us how powerful the human spirit can be, like Grace's, then hit that like button, share it, and don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes one story is all it takes to help someone start healing.